Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried and Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires BeliefCast. As always, I'm so grateful for you guys tuning in week after week. It means the world to me. I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors. You guys have been so fantastic in helping me get to where I am today. Wasatch Recovery, Siegfried and Jensen, Maury Nutrition, and Thread Wallets. Thank you so much, guys, for believing in me and believing in the cause. And today we are joined by two special people in my life, honestly, people that I look up to, and both of them have been on my podcast a couple times, and now I have them together. And it's cool how this all kind of came about. And so we are in for a treat. And I want to, before I introduce them, I people ask me all the time, your podcast is doing so well, and they're asking me like I'm some expert kind of thing. I'm like, well, no, the only reason why this has gone well is because of my guests, and I don't make it about me. And so it's gone really well. So today's going to be no different. We are in for a treat. Today we have Boyd Matheson. He is the host of KSL NewsRadio Inside Sources, KSL's TV Sunday edition, and nationally recognized social and political commentator. I've known Boyd for years now. He's an amazing human being who lives by principles that I admire. I really love having him here. I'm getting emotional. I don't know why.
See, this is why I made sure there was
I know.
cleaners.
And then we also have Ganel-Lyn Condie, who is a popular motivational speaker. She is an author who's written how many? 17 books?
17, 18
I mean, are you
almost,
kidding me?
yeah.
It's amazing. She has a bachelor's of education and minor in psychology. She's gone through some really tough times. She lost her sister to suicide. And you've been an advocate for mental health for many, many years. You speak in the prisons. You're on Good Things Utah. You have your own talk show. You've got all kinds of things. You're doing so much. Both of you are two of the most busy people I've ever met. But yet the stuff you're doing is needed. It's good. It brings light into this world. And so welcome to the show.
Well, it's good to be here with two of my favorite people in one spot. I just feel like it's when Reese's Peanut Butter decided to put chocolate and peanut butter together. That's what this feels like. This feels like taking two of my favorites and putting them together is just like elevating everything.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's
Yeah, great spot. Nowhere better to be, and no more important conversation to have. So
Yeah. No, and again, like I said, you both have been on before, and the feedback I've received from both of your episodes, the multiples of those have been so fantastic. And so we are all in for a treat, and I'm the one who's going to be blessed the most because I get to sit with you guys and hear your knowledge and your takes on what we need to talk about. So I thought we'd talk about, let's kick it off with some compassion. It feels like the world in a lot of ways is lacking compassion. I see it a lot with my clients that I deal with on a daily basis, but the world, it's almost like it's like, if you're not an alpha male, if you're not, it's like get up and go and grind. And, it's almost like that. If you're not doing that, you're looked down upon. And, that's not for everyone to live that way. Nothing wrong with going out and grinding. But at the same time, I feel like people are looked down upon. People don't have compassion for those who are struggling. I know you two do. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. And Boyd, maybe we start with you. I know it's been on your mind over the last few days, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I had a really interesting conversation this week, and it's the one thing that is so awesome about the work that all of us do is we get to meet extraordinary people. We can be radically curious about what is going on. And I had the opportunity to sit down with Yeonmi Park, who defected from North Korea. And she actually got me thinking about compassion because she was talking about growing up in North Korea, very oppressive regime. And she said, one of the things that you don't have is what you don't learn. And one of the things you don't learn is compassion. And she described, walking to her school and, seeing a dead body on the street was not uncommon. And when they saw that, you didn't think anything or feel anything. She said it was no different than seeing a tree. at the side of the road.
Dang.
And so that absence of compassion is such a scary thing, not only in a regime like that, but in a world that we all live in.
Yeah.
When we disconnect from who we are as human beings, fellow travelers, then everything goes sideways. And we see it in our politics. We see it in the zero-sum game of, if you're doing better, that means I'm doing less better, so therefore you must be bad and evil and awful because there's only enough, rather than having that abundance mentality. Compassion is born of abundance. Compassion is born of understanding. Compassion is really born of being curious of, I wonder why Ganel-Lyn thinks that way, or I wonder why she thinks that's a good solution to that problem. Because that's where the wonder is, where awe is, and that's where we actually start to understand our place in the world and our place between heaven and earth. Because when you understand place, getting to peace and compassion is a whole lot easier.
Well, one thing you said that I've learned from you is about you've always had this belief that there's abundance, there's enough for everyone. Yeah. And instead of having the mentality like, oh, they're doing good, so I must be doing bad. Yeah. Right? I love that you believe that, and that's your philosophy. Like, no, there is enough for all of us to go out and make a difference in this world, and we got to be careful not to compare. Yeah. But I love that you point that out.
Well, I feel like you're both examples of trying to help always pass on or open doors for others. And I was just thinking as you were talking about that example from North Korea, just recently watched a disturbing but inspiring movie, Zone of Interest. And it's a perspective true story, which is disturbing of itself,
right?
Of kind of the architect of the gas chambers and Auschwitz, and his family lived literally like their garden wall shared the wall of Auschwitz, and the family was swimming in the pool and growing the garden and had their house-made slaves and had this very specific zone of interest, right? And on the other side of the garden wall, literally the chimneys are going 24 hours a day, and he eventually House is who's the architect, is found a year after the war ends and brought to Nuremberg and tried for war crimes and responsible for, they think, at least 3 million deaths. And when you were just talking about North Korea, it's like, what is our zone of interest? And one of the things I feel when I talk to both of you is I don't even sometimes register where I'm depleted in compassion until I'm with someone that shows up in compassion. And so that's why I cry oftentimes talking to both of you within 2 minutes, because even as intentional as I try to be with my own self-compassion and my own mental health, sometimes my zone of interest is off, where I'm outputting the compassion and not always receiving. Both of you are so generous about opening doors of compassion for others, and I think it's that abundance mindset. What are we focusing on? And we could be sitting next to the biggest atrocities. And one part of this movie that I wish if I could tell the filmmakers from Poland, one adjustment was they have this underlining story of a girl in the town that every night she goes out and puts apples in the dig pits where all of the concentration camp, workers that weren't gassed right away were taken. And every night she goes out and sticks these apples. And one night she goes and sticks an apple and finds some music that one of the camp members had stuck in the pit. So she would find it. And the movie just kind of touches on that in the same town, there was this family that was just living their lives and comfortable in war and benefiting from it. And then this one girl that I think, what will be the number of lives she impacted and saved? And she didn't know. We don't know her story, right? And at what point will God show each of us the little apples that we've placed? And how do you measure that? And so I think compassion,
I like that.
When you just spend a minute listening to someone or asking how they're doing or looking them in the eye or opening the door or leaving an apple, I mean, that's huge. And both of you have impacted my life at various times when I didn't realize I was depleted, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's the important thing when we're talking compassion, that a little bit goes a really long way.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too because the world that we live in is just disconnecting. It's desensitizing. A lot of what we see in social media can just desensitize us to kind of the shock factor wears off, and you don't think about it anymore. It was really interesting after Breonna Taylor's tragic death in Kentucky by the police. There's only one officer that was actually charged in that case, and he was charged with wanton endangerment. And if you look it up in the Kentucky State Code, yes, I looked it up in the Kentucky State Code.
That's why we have Boyd.
That's why we have Boyd. Yeah.
But the definition of that is extreme indifference to human life.
Dang.
Extreme indifference, and that was one of those 2x4 to the head moments for me of like, how often am I being indifferent? Indifference is worse than anger, I think, because anger, you're at least showing emotion towards someone that you care, that you have passion towards something. Extreme indifference is the ultimate. It's the ultimate disconnector, and it's the opposite of compassion. And so we have to be careful, especially in the world where we have this 24/7 news cycle and social media is always in our face. You talked about comparison. Looking at your life through comparison is always fatal vision, and it often leads us to disconnect more.
Yeah.
But then you get to that indifference moment, and then you've done two things. You've isolated yourself, and you've disconnected your ability to impact others.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us human, and that's also what makes us divine.
Yeah. Wow. Beautifully said.
I love what you said though about that kind of like grind mentality, and I had this on my mind yesterday a lot of why do we describe or define success by like doubling the matrix or
Right.
50% increase in sales or 100% increase in followers and I was listening to a content creator just say, what if success was really that you sit on the couch and you can read your book and your dog's there? Why is it that success is only about more?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, the values or virtues that we sometimes feel are limited. There's really no end to compassion and love and forgiveness, right? Yeah. But success feels like no matter how much you double it, you're always thinking, if you've defined it a certain way, that there's a lack.
What's next?
Yeah. And yet the values that I think at 53 that really matter to me the most, there is no end to them. And yet if you took them down to the bare elements of what make them a value, it's not the things that we think. It's not money. It's not fame. It's not number of followers or how big your house is. And so I wonder if we redefined what success was, we would get a greater sense to some of those other things we want access to, which is compassion and love and forgiveness, because all of a sudden we'd see it. Like, wait, it's in this moment of this conversation. It's in this sitting still and feeling contentment in my life. It's not being comparison driven on social media, but it is those one-on-one conversations that we're having, and all of a sudden we do have enough and we do feel successful and we aren't so depleted.
I love that. I heard Gary V, he's a motivational speaker. He talks about how the definition of success should be for all of us is waking up in a good mood.
Wow.
Because you can have the car, you can have the money, you can have the followers, you can have all this stuff, but if you're waking up stressed out, angry, upset, whatever it may be, well, is that really success because you got all this, but yet you're waking up miserable? So the definition should be waking up in a good mood. I woke up today and I feel great, right? If we can get to that place consistently, that's what success should probably look like, because ultimately we're talking about more. I think it's in the Buddhist tradition where they say,
knew it was coming. Hold on.
it's all right. That was Ganel-Lyn, by the way. She's coughing. We got her a water though. But they talk about the definition of abundance, and it's usually more, but it's in the Buddhist philosophy, abundance means being. To be able to sit on the couch and just be and know that you're okay. A lot of my clients will be like, why did you relapse? And it's like, well, I was bored. And I'll ask them, what's the definition of bored? Like, how would you define that? And they can't define it. And I'll say, it's you're uncomfortable in your own skin, so you need to distract yourself from yourself. You can't just sit and be.
Yeah.
I just thought, no, it's interesting.
Yeah, and really getting to that, being that ability to be present, to just be still in a moment. But that's also crucial in terms of our compassion and our connection to other people. I still believe that the most holy thing, sacred thing you can give another person is your presence, your whole presence.
Yeah.
And whether it's with a spouse, whether it's with a child, whether it's with a friend, when you can be wholly present, WHOLEY, you can be fully, completely present, then you can be wholly, sacredly present. And that changes everything.
Yeah. And again, and I know you don't need the praise or want the praise, but you're really good at that, like making people, when you're talking to them, I remember all my conversations with you, you made me feel like I'm the only person in the room. And it did. There is a difference. You can tell, like that this person's engaged. They care about what I'm thinking and saying, and I'm seen.
Yeah,
Both of you are brilliant at that. Both of you are brilliant.
I try. I try to follow this guy.
Well, it's true.
That's good because I'm following Ganel-Lyn,
so we can't go wrong.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I do think though too that to go underneath, whether it's bored and relapse and addiction or it's compassion, I think it's a pain problem, you know? And when we look at managing pain in the world, whether it's with pharmaceuticals or distraction or social media, whatever it is, I think our response in the world, whether it's on the political stage or in our mental health or in our relationships, is about pain control. You know, it's been 10 years since Meg died by suicide, which is crazy because I feel like there's moments where I think that was last week, and then there's other moments I'm thinking, what have I done with that stewardship of 10 years of pain? And what do I understand about my own pain? What do I understand about pain in the world? And one of the things I think is so inspiring about watching both of you is that when we give space for being wholly present and connection, we're managing pain. And actually social media, I don't believe, is giving us that, right? I appreciate when people give feedback and say, I go to your pages because I know I'm going to feel that sacred, holy perspective on the world. It's what I try to share, and I know both of you do as well. But in reality, did not we learn from COVID that we were lacking in, and all of a sudden we got a cultural wake up of, wait, we're in pain and we're not together and we're not holding space for that. And I think one of the greatest gifts is to have a friend that is willing to sit with you and not say, okay, I've got to get going or I'm distracted by whatever, and I'm going to just sit a little longer with you in that pain. And I think the research shows it only takes 8 seconds. Like, it's not this long, you know, please solve my problems, be my therapist. But we do have this, I think, problem right now of pain control.
Yeah, wow.
Can I play off of that?
Please.
Just listening to Ganel-Lyn describe that, I think there's so many who are out there who are in pain. And to your body, that pain is the same, whether it's mental, emotional, physical. And then there's this sort of whipsaw kind of thing that happens because so I dealt with cluster migraines for 30 plus years. And
there's nothing worse.
Oh man.
It is it is.
I mean, if there's a cute label for it, it sounds fine. But if you sit with it for a moment and understand what that means,
there's lots of descriptors, but none of them are positive when it comes to cluster migraines. But so there was always this moment. So I'd get up in the morning, and if my pain was at a 7, it was like, okay, game on. Let's do the day. But then the moment that pain went up a notch, went to maybe an 8 on that pain scale, then the whipsaw would start, and I'd have past pain, memories of how awful it was last time, all the devastation it caused the last time, ended up at the ER, had to do this or that, and so you have this going backwards facing remembrance of how bad it was or how painful it felt, and then you also have this projection forward of, is this my new normal? Or if I take something, I'm going to miss the game, or I'm going to have to miss work, or if I don't do anything, I'm going to end up back in the, So you've got past and future And that's a whipsaw in and of
Oh,
itself. It's a
big time.
downward spiral.
Yeah,
in terms of
right.
relapse and things
Sure.
like that, I mean, that's the
That's
fast
the
path.
definition
Yeah.
of pain right there,
Yeah.
right? You're in the future and the past all at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
And
wow.
so for me, the whole thing was learning to be present, and really the power of, I think, what has become my favorite word, and A-N-D, that I
same.
can feel this pain and I can still get my work done. I can feel this pain and I can still
Love
go to my
that.
kid's game or,
Yeah.
or be at a family activity or whatever it may be. And so learning to push the past and the future out of the equation. And sometimes we do need to sit with our pain. And sometimes we need to sit with a friend in our pain.
Yeah.
But if we can do that in a present space as opposed to backward facing or looking off into this is going to be perpetual, we can get really still in that moment. And that actually helps us to figure out how do we actually live with that in a way that's actually positive.
Wow, it's beautiful.
I think both of you love to like turn the lens back onto somebody else. So I'm going to turn the lens back on both of you. Because I'm the unofficial
Hey, that is
producer
not in the
of the
rules
second.
today.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Remember,
That wasn't in your talking points.
I was the unofficial producer of this segment. I think it's interesting as you were talking, and because I feel like I've gotten to know both of you professionally and then over time personally.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting if I think we were to both, turn the lenses back on each other and say, what do you think your biggest weaknesses or your biggest strength is, right? It's interesting to me every time I try that, experiment. It's funny to me that the things people will say are literally the opposite of what I would think they would say because it's the strength I see in them. Mm-hmm. And I think as you were just talking, Boyd, a little bit of what I know of you on a friendship level is that that's your superpower of staying very present. In the last
for sure.
10 months, I've leaned on Boyd as a friend to be like, I'm frustrated with the wandering that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And I wonder if potentially that chronic condition has actually created that superpower of staying very present and intentional. And I would say the same for you. If you've taken this journey of addiction and really given it back to the world in a way that you've been able to take your pain and it's become your superpower in holding space for other people's pain. And so I would just offer to listeners, wherever you think you're lacking or you're inadequate in that area, I wonder if you're currently not aware that that's actually what people closest to you would say is your superpower, that you've gotten so good at the end and staying present.
Yeah.
I mean, you were just sharing with me recently, Boyd, was about how good he's gotten at when he landed and that's where he was at. And then when you get home, that's where you're at.
Yeah.
And I said to you, wow, before it was cool to be like intentional and mindful, Boyd was already practicing it. What a gift if you're dealing with chronic pain to practice that gift, and same for you. And I would just say for myself, it's usually the area of my life that I'm feeling the most shame about or frustrated with, or why haven't I made progress in this area? And then others will reflect back, wait, what? That's where I think you're amazing. That's where you're a superpower. And what? Really? No. That's where I'm still a work in progress for sure.
But that's so important for everyone to recognize. And that is one of Ganel-Lyn's superpowers, is to help us see those spaces, because earned empathy is a real thing. And there is a softening that comes through our own suffering, that if we don't just focus on ourselves and we start to reflect that back out, that's where the greatest opportunities for impact are. And as Ganel-Lyn said, sometimes you don't recognize that you're doing that, but often that's what other people see and what they're actually attracted to. Earned empathy is like a magnet. And I know you both have had experiences where people are just drawn into your life and into your circle because they need the earned empathy that you've done the hard work and heavy lifting over the course of your life to actually own.
Wow. It reminds me, and this might not make sense, but it should. You shared something with me once about Neil A. Maxwell when he got cancer, and he was asked by someone, I think a reporter, like, you've served the Lord, you've done all this stuff, and all of a sudden now you get cancer. Do you feel like you've basically been kind of gypped? And if I remember the story right, he says, basically, I now can testify with authenticity.
Yeah.
I've never forgotten that story. I mean, you're like this wise man in my life who's told me so many
He's
nuggets.
Yoda.
And I still use like Kairos moments and stuff. I share it with my clients every day, and I always give credit to you. But it's almost like when you go through those trials, you can now testify, if you will, with authenticity.
Yeah.
I know what you're feeling because I've been there.
Yeah.
You know
And I
what's
love
coming
that.
to my mind is our shared favorite story of the pit. Like, Boyd and I share a love of West Wing, and there's this great. And I just messaged him the other day because I've rewatched the whole series probably 40 times, which is somewhat embarrassing.
She's
probably.
still 10 behind my family, but it's okay.
But
Boyd's got you beat.
in real time, it was the episode that we both really love, and it's exactly that story of a previous addict in recovery who's the boss of Josh Lyman, for all the West Wing fans out there, who's dealing with PTSD after being shot, and he's having a response, and they get some help for him. And he's afraid he's going to lose his job because it's probably not effective to have PTSD and work in the West Wing. And his boss, Leo McGarry, tells this great story of, the guy that's walking along and falls in a pit and yells for help, and his rabbi walks by. I always change it up. It's like Mormon bishop, rabbi, Catholic priest.
Yeah.
I give all reps because I love interfaith. So his rabbi throws a scripture down, and he keeps yelling, help, help. And the doctor walks by and throws a prescription down, and then he's yelling, help, help. And his friend walks by and jumps in the pit. And he's like, dude, now we're both stuck here. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I've been in this pit and I know the way out.
Oh, wow.
And I just think of that often of, Neil A. Maxwell could squeeze more in one sentence than, I mean,
right?
I think he's
essence of the essence
Right.
of the essence.
I was just talking to Carrie Muhlestein yesterday. He's the Isaiah expert, and I'm like, I think Neil A. Maxwell was the modern day Isaiah. Like, why Isaiah triggers people is because Isaiah was squeezing like everything into 2 words,
Yeah.
And sometimes I think when you're in those pit moments, it's so helpful. That's why I think podcasts are so effective. You have no idea what this conversation does for someone who's fallen in the pit 2 weeks from now or 2 years from now, that they remember a story or a reflection.
I love that. I had and we'll move on to another subject. I could talk to you guys all day on this stuff, but I had a client stand up here who's, been through hell and back, heroin addict. Just, you can imagine, it's not just the drugs, it's all the criminal behavior and all the consequences from that.
The lack of relationship trust.
All of it. Well, he stands up and we were going around the room. Everyone, hey, you got something on your heart to share today? There was no, just if you got anything. And this guy gets up, and I put it to my memory because I thought, I don't want to ever forget this. And he stands up and he says, I try to find myself I could not see. I tried to find my God eluded me. I tried to find my brother. I've found all 3. And I thought, dang.
Love that.
There's where it is. And again, what we're talking about ultimately, because when we have compassion, we typically are reaching out and finding our brother or sister who's struggling. And in that process, we find ourselves, we find a God, it's like the trifecta, right?
Yeah.
We get all of them in that moment. And again, that's what we're ultimately talking about here. And it's just beautiful to hear your words on compassion, both of you, and hopefully, people listening to this, man, you're feeling this because you're feeling what I'm feeling. This is amazing.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that we live in this society that is really pushing towards the opposite ends of that. It is all of this othering them kind of language that disconnects us and prevents us from being brothers and sisters and having that connection. I had a conversation with John Powell, who actually has a new book coming out on othering. He's down at Cal Berkeley. Amazing guy. He's someone everybody should read. You should go listen to his podcast.
Yeah.
But he described the work that he did in Africa, and in many of these villages, the way they greet each other is not, hey, how you doing, or how's the weather, or what's going on. It's the God in me sees the God in you. And I just love that whole principle and concept. That's how we have to see each other, and when the God in me sees the God in you, we get past labels, we get past social economics, we get past race and religion and all the other otherings that are out there,
That's
and then you can have a
amazing.
completely different kind of conversation with someone because you're not even seeing them. Sometimes we say, if you can only see them as God sees them, just see them.
Mm-hmm.
Just see them wherever they are, whatever's going on. Just see. And when we stop and slow ourselves down enough to be present enough to actually see that I see you, the God in me sees the God in you. That's a different opportunity for sure.
But I do think that
That's
othering
powerful.
is the result of lack of pain control.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that cop that was charged in that shooting, I think shout out to our first responders and their mental health right now of pain
Right.
control.
Mm.
And I
100%,
think if we're not giving space for conversations, especially for men's health, right? When generally we're not giving those opportunities to process some of that, then I do think we become numb to, and then it's easier to just other each other.
That's right.
Because then it allows us to feel some sense of safety. Like if you're about that, and I can tell myself a story about why in a presidential election year you're acting that way and posting that way, I don't even have to engage. And I just wonder if there's a fatigue factor that we're not addressing, so that we're not giving conversations to each other. And like the North Korea, I mean, if no one has given you space for that, and no one has even taught you to be aware of that, to really walk into a culture where you see it in abundance. In our African, my son lived in Africa for 2 years, and he knew he was back in America when he landed in Atlanta, and everyone's phones were in their faces.
Yeah.
And he just spent 2 years in Zimbabwe where there was no food, there was no money, there was no
one's in their phone.
and no one's in their phone, and there was no political confidence, right? There was just corruption, and he was starving when he got home, right? I mean, he was just, his pants were literally just like he'd walk around and they'd just come off, and yet he was just so like aware that he had been with happy people, and yet everything on their checklist of things they should have been happy for when they woke up in the morning weren't what we just take for granted, generally speaking. And he's like, I knew I was in America because no one was looking at each other and no one was smiling at each other. And I just wonder, isn't that interesting that this country that was like politically so divided, and the police were corrupt, and there was no food, and there was no resources, and there was inflation, like we have a $50 billion bill from Zimbabwe that was worth less than our $1 bill, right? And yet he felt happiness for 2 years among people that shouldn't have been. And yet here we are. So what do we need to shift so that all that I acquire and all the stories I'm telling about you over there in that group, where are we not like releasing the valve in our pain so we even have capacity to see each other and hold space for each other? And maybe it's putting the phone down. I don't know.
Could be.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
I heard it once said, we used to look up for inspiration. Now we all look down.
Yeah.
And it's beautifully said. Both of those, the God in me sees the God in you. I love that.
Which is namaste, and I'm 200-hour yoga trained. I don't do a lot
yeah,
of it.
you know that.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's why it is such a sacred practice of like what culturally could we learn from other cultures that do it better and do it more effectively. I mean, when I'm around any of the Polynesian people or the Zimbabwean people, or, there's certain cultures that just generally I'm like, you guys need to teach a master class because you figured something out that some cultures just
that we need
haven't.
Yeah. Wow. Well, speaking of a presidential election year and othering, I have a lot of people that come to me, and they're stressed out about this year already, knowing what they think's coming, like this war of words, the mudslinging, if you will, and things like that. And maybe, Boyd, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, I mean, how do we navigate this year coming up? Just maybe the average person who's going to go through this and watch what's going to happen in our country, and obviously there's going to be a great divide, it feels like, at least. Yeah. How do we navigate through all that and again, maybe show compassion and love for people who don't believe what maybe we believe in?
Yeah. So I think the first thing we all have to do is not believe any of it, because it's actually not true. The country is not that divided.
Right.
It is not that divided. So that's a really important truth for us to put a stake in the ground.
Like that.
The vast majority of this country is center left to center right. What we hear from are the extreme left and the extreme right. And they do this performative politics because that's what gets them likes and clicks and fundraising emails and so on. We affectionately refer to it, I know this is a family friendly, but we call it performative jackassery. And that's what gets rewarded over and over again. But it prevents us from having real conversation. So the first thing is to remember we are not that divided.
Love that.
Quick example. We've been hearing a lot of screaming and yelling about the border and immigration.
Yeah, lately.
And that is the great divide. It is not. I am still absolutely convinced that we could solve 94.5% of the immigration and border issue in a single afternoon on the floor of the House and the Senate because everybody agrees.
Wow.
Everybody agrees. But both political parties and the extremes of both political parties love this as a wedge issue. They use it to raise money for their campaigns. They use it as a way to win elections and to the other people.
Yeah.
They're not just wrong, but they're wrong and evil. And so I think more than we have a political polarization problem in the country, we have a contempt problem.
Ooh,
and contempt
okay.
is that belief in the worthlessness of another individual because you disagree.
Okay.
So you're not just wrong, you're wrong but evil. And so to me, we have to get past that. And I think the most important thing we all should remember is that it is community and culture that lead this country.
Okay.
And the politicians will follow. And it's been like that from the very beginning of the country. All of the early battles of the Revolutionary War were community driven. You got a problem, you go grab 70 guys out of the church, and that's Lexington, Concord, Bunker Hill. Those were all, they didn't have time for command and control.
Right.
It was just protect your community.
Yeah.
Or waiting for a tweet to tell them what to do.
What to do. I always love the example of Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball in 1947. It took Congress 17 more years
To make the policy
to get
change.
any kind of change in terms of civil rights
Jeez,
legislation.
I didn't realize it was that long.
Even the no-brainer stuff, Mother's Day. Most people
It's
don't
true.
realize
It's true.
Congress voted against having a Mother's Day. I think it's like 18 times.
Are you serious?
Now,
I didn't know that.
As a guy with 7 sisters, a mother, a wife, 3 daughters, and
Yeah.
3 granddaughters, if mother's in the bill, the vote is yes.
Yeah.
Right? But Congress voted no. And this sweet lady from West Virginia
Yes.
who just wanted to honor her angel mother, she gave up on Congress. She went back to her community. She went home. And they passed a Mother's Day. And then West
okay.
Virginia became the first state to have a Mother's Day.
Wow.
And then she didn't stop there. Then she went to Connecticut and Rhode Island. And only after every state in the nation had a Mother's Day, then and only then did Congress courageously, boldly step forward and declare we shall have a Mother's Day. And so,
Wow,
so
I
it's
did not know
community and culture that lead. I always get great motivation. We have in my neighborhood the ultimate. And this is why politics never gets me down. I hate politics, actually.
Just so good for his job.
Right?
Approval.
And I hate, but I only talk about politics so I can explore society, and I explore society so I can get to the principles and the people who live them.
Yeah.
So I remember very clearly in 2016, after a very contentious, divisive election.
Sure. Yeah.
That Saturday, we have a little thing in my neighborhood that my neighbor, Denise Anderson, who's also our mayor, that we've done for years. We have, you'll love this, we have a 1K
I do love it.
donut run. Donut run.
Yeah.
What?
1K. Now, 1K is barely, not even the length of one of the streets in our neighborhood. Like it is over before it starts. But everybody shows up. And so I showed up, and I'll be honest, I didn't want to go. I was exhausted by the election in 2016. I was done. But I showed up there on a Saturday morning, and people are talking, and there was a group of BYU students who had seen it on social media and showed up, and everybody made donations to a great cause. The gun fired. 30 seconds later, everybody's finished. But then everybody stayed for hours.
Wow.
And just had donuts and chatted about all the other things. I thought, you know what? Community and culture lead. Politicians will follow. They want us to believe that the answers are in Washington or in some marbled hall in Congress.
Yeah.
And they're not. they're in your home and they're in your relationships and they're in our community. And so as we go through all of this, most of it is just noise. Most of it's noise.
Okay.
I've never been more pessimistic about the politics in the country. I've never been more bullish on the future of the country.
Okay.
And it's because of the people.
I love that.
And you can go anywhere in this country. I was in Indiana just a couple weeks ago, and you walk down Main Street in Indianapolis, it's like, we're going to be just fine.
Wow.
These are good people doing good stuff.
Even in the winter.
Even in the winter. Even though it was cold and miserable.
Dang.
The steaks were fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you know what? That's why I listen to Boyd pretty much every day.
Well,
if
right.
I
I've
can.
learned so much in the last 5
yeah.
minutes. I'm just going mind
Yes.
blown.
But I do think
Seriously.
I do think that it's about giving our power away.
Yeah.
And I know Boyd has talked about it and framed it within political decision making but I do think we do that all the time in our own lives. You know, I went through a job loss in May of 2023 at the same time that my last child left home. And so it's just been a discombobulating a little bit just from an identity standpoint, because I still have continued to work, but there was this like regular steadiness of motherhood and a weekly show that were all of a sudden gone at the same time.
Yeah.
And I've spent the better part of the last 10 months kind of trying to grapple with, you know, where's the power in my life and where am I giving that power?
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot about the power of wandering and wondering, right? Yeah. And if you read scripture, you see that God believes in that power where he takes us out of what's comfortable. He, for more than we really want to, we wander. And the children of Israel are a great example of like a 2-mile radius. It took 40 years to get. Well, why? Because it's in the wandering and the wondering that sometimes we get that wisdom, and we want to arrive. We want to get there. And I think we want the election to be done, or we want to, you know, pay off the house, or we want it. We want the result. And I remember saying, okay, I can wander until fall. And then fall came. Okay, I can wander until Thanksgiving. And then Thanksgiving came. And then Christmas, and then New Year's. And here we are, February at the time of this taping. And I'm still wandering on certain levels. And it's not comfortable. You know, it's not comfortable. And yet what I've learned, and Boyd knows this, but I've started making sourdough bread. I'm the last person on the planet that's figured out how to do it. And so I've been doing a sourdough ministry. That's what I call it.
Nice.
And
it's
I wake,
awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
I wake up every day and make a couple loaves and pray about who needs it. And that has been a really, like, it's sacred for me because it's been
That's
this
beautiful.
bridge of everything we've talked about. It's allowed me to stay in compassion. It's allowed me to stay connected. I've had some really powerful experiences where, you know, even last week, God was like, you need to take bread to this person. And I didn't want to. I had a whole story. We had history. It was snowing really bad that day. My GPS took me in the wrong direction. We ended up having a really sacred conversation, and it was painful. I mean, I held space for her pain. She held space for mine. We had told ourselves stories about what we thought the other person had been given, you know?
Yeah.
And this loaf of sourdough became this balm. And
wow.
I've had a number of those really quiet moments where I don't love the wandering, but I think we all have some sourdough we can share, you know? Maybe it's not for you actual bread, but we all have something that's kind of our maybe unique offering or perspective on the world.
Yeah.
You both do it beautifully. That can, if we make it not about sales or followers or policy change, it can lead to conversations that really do shift the world. And on many levels, I came home one night and I was getting texts from the people I'd given sourdough to, and my husband is so great and so supportive and very busy right now. And he's like, see how you're changing the world with sourdough. And I was like, but I want the macro impact. I don't want the micro impact. You know, I feel like God's put me on earth, and that's really vulnerable for me to share. That's a really powerful wrestle that I'm having right now. Yeah. And I hear God, and I hear Boyd, and I hear Todd in my head say, like, just keep showing up in the and for right now, wander a little bit longer and see where you're getting those lessons or shifts or changes. and really not give that power away. And that was my whole tie back in, like, don't give the power back to DC. Have it be over the fence in your yard.
I love that.
With your neighbor. Have it be in the conversation with someone the day after an election when you're doing a donor run. I'm coming this year.
You better.
I am coming this year because you're right. At some point, a good chunk of the nation's not going to be happy in November when they wake up, you know.
Yeah,
and yet
not.
Maybe it's a smaller group than we think. That,
Well,
that
I
are really
love
gonna
that,
be
and
upset.
I love that you pointed that out, and thank you for what you shared, beautiful, Boyd, about all the stuff, the far left, far right. It's just stuff that gets clicks on the TV, gets our eyes on there, but it's not what's really going on.
Yeah.
And I love that you point that out, and I needed to hear that today actually, because I have these people asking me, and I'm going, "You're asking me? Well, yeah, it is a little crazy out there, and good luck, And but I love what you said, that we're actually we're closer than we think.
Yeah.
Most of us are right there in the center right, center left. We're closer than you think, and most people want the good for each other.
Yeah, and the most important question we all can ask is not what some policy debate was, or what some argument was, or fist fight on cable news was. It was, did I help a neighbor in need? Did I show up for a brother or sister today?
Yeah.
Did I make that call? Did I send that text to somebody? I thought, I wonder how they're doing today. And because that's where it all happens. It's not these marbled halls. It's a teacher staying after class to help somebody that's struggling.
Yeah.
It's a fifth grader standing up to a bully for a friend.
Amen.
Yeah.
It's a neighbor helping a neighbor in need, and that's where it all happens, and that's where we have to stay, because as long as we're doing that, the country's going to be fine. The most important day this year is not the first Tuesday in November. It's the first Wednesday of November. Because on the first Wednesday of November, Todd, you're going to get out of bed. You're going to be grateful.
Yeah.
You're going to be excited, and you're going to come in. You're going to make a difference in somebody's life. And that's going to happen all across the country.
Yeah.
Every single day. And the first Wednesday is way more important than the first Tuesday.
Yeah.
Because
you've always told me that, by the way. When I was working with you, you'd always say that. I'm like, man, he's so profound, man. It's it's all perspective in the way we look at it. And I love that.
Yeah.
It's like, what am I going to do today to make a difference?
Yeah.
Because again, I can't maybe affect what happens, up on the hill there, if you will, but I can make a difference with the neighbor across the fence, or sitting here with you two, and hopefully people listening to this are getting, fed, and feeling better about themselves in the future.
And sometimes, we have to have the reality check too.
Yeah.
There are really hard, awful, no good, terrible, really bad days for all of us. And that's a reality. And so this is not about Pollyanna. This is not about glasses that are half full or half empty, or rose-colored, or anything else. It's not about a kumbaya moment or a group hug, because sometimes you just have to move through it. I had a really interesting experience a couple of years ago. I followed President Russell M. Nelson of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on a global ministry tour. And he spoke to large groups starting in Western Samoa. And it was just this very interesting thing to watch. I was there to just kind of watch and navigate. And in Western Samoa, it rained and it rained. They were at this big outside field. And then just moments before the meeting was to begin, the rain stops, and the meeting was beautiful. And then they went on to Fiji. And in Fiji, it was raining and raining. And then they started the meeting, and they were singing an opening song. And during the song, the rain stopped. And then it was Samoa from there, and it was the same pattern, and it rained and rained and rained. And during the opening prayer, as they were starting this meeting, it stopped. And then we got to Tonga, and the members of the Church of Jesus Christ in Tonga had come early, hours early. They had been invited to come. They were so ready to be fed. To hear words that were going to inspire them, galvanize them in their faith and their belief and their hope for the future. Yeah. And so they came early, and there were thousands and thousands on this big soccer field, and it rained. Yeah. I mean, it was almost a lake by the end, and it rained, and it rained. And they got ready to start the meeting, and it rained. And they sang an opening song, and it rained harder. And they said the opening prayer to the meeting, and it rained harder. And it rained for the complete time of the meeting. Yeah. And not a single one of those Tongan members of the church moved. They sat there in the rain. Yeah. They had been in the rain for hours and hours. And sometimes the rain doesn't stop. Sometimes we do have a tragic loss in our families. Sometimes we have really, really hard things. And sometimes it's just rain. But it is, I always say it is against the laws of nature and nature's God that a storm will last forever. It's just not how it works.
Yeah.
Storms come, and then ultimately they go. Some of them linger really long.
Linger longer.
But they do move on.
Yeah.
And so it's against the laws of nature, and I think of nature's God, that we have to stay in that forever. But we do have to be willing to sit in the rain sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And some of the most profound things I think I've learned sitting in the rain and the mud, or sitting with a friend in the rain or the mud.
Yeah.
I just had
Beautifully
this
said.
same conversation with a friend yesterday about a friend that in our faith, you know, everyone in her family has left this faith, and she's kind of left there.
Yeah.
And I think no matter what your faith identity is, you can relate to that feeling of
Sure. Yeah.
whether you're a Baptist mom or a Catholic dad or a Jewish, you know, sister, when you're feeling like, wait, I'm going to sit in the rain all by myself. You know, no one's going to sit here. And this other friend was asking about this friend. How is she doing? And I said, you know, I don't know. I don't know how many more rainstorms or blows she can withstand. And some of us are walking around looking like we have sat through a lot of rainstorms, and it doesn't look pretty, and we're barely hanging out. It's messy, and it doesn't look pretty. But the people I look around and I'm inspired the most by are the ones that just literally keep showing up and keep trying. And it's not the people that have taken the easier way. Like, it's not, those aren't the people that, you know, I don't know anyone that's inspired me that said, you know, I just, you know, decided I was going to go to school, and then I got a job and paid my bills and planted the garden and had the kids, and great. What do you have to share with me? You know, I think it's the battered and the bruised. You know, what is that great? Is it Roosevelt, right? The battered and the abused, and the people that were willing to go out on the field. Well, we can talk about that. It makes a great hashtag. It makes a great bumper sticker. But when you're the person that's sitting in that storm, or you've been hit by lightning on top of sitting in the rain, right? And it's obvious that you're not looking great. The people that keep showing up, I don't know what it is, but if this is the one room schoolhouse and we're all in it here together, some of us are the kindergartner that hasn't even heard of algebra. And then there's others that are like, they've done advanced calculus and failed 15 times. We're sitting in the same room, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that there are people I can look around and say, those are the movies, those are the books, those are the podcasts, those are the people that help me when the rain doesn't stop. Then I'm thinking, there's a wisdom that came from your wound. It didn't come any other way. There was no other way for you to have that wisdom and that beauty. And you know, the survivors of the Holocaust that went on to do mental health work and inspire us, Viktor Frankl and others, right? What would we have gotten if they hadn't been willing to steward in those spaces?
And being willing to lean into that. Ganel-Lyn and I had the opportunity on Ganel-Lyn's podcast to talk with one of my favorite new friends this year, Rabbi Brad Hirschfield from
Rabbi
New York.
Brad.
And he's doing some just extraordinary work. But he and I connected on October the 8th. The day after Hamas, horrific atrocities committed. And he had written something. I had an amazing producer, Bella Pinnock, who I still don't know how she's like a white wizard of some sort. She tracked him down and in like 7 minutes and had him on my show live.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so here was someone who is Jewish, who knew people, who had family members who knew people, or who had loved ones who were actually killed in those atrocities on October 7th. I mean, it was real and it was raw. And he said something that just, I mean, talk about blowing your Dixie cup. My Dixie cup always runneth over. You have to be old to understand what a Dixie cup is anymore.
I'm old enough. I
love the Dixie cups.
But he said something so amazing. He said, compassion, kind of go full circle. He said, compassion demands that I feel sorrow not just for my friends and loved ones or fellow countrymen or fellow Jews that died in that atrocity, compassion demands that I have sorrow for everyone, including the Hamas soldier who committed the act and then was killed. Wow. And he says, and it's not that we conflate things, and it's not that we make them equal, but compassion for every human life is the beginning.
Dang. That is so profound, so powerful. Ooh.
Yeah, and I don't think, that means that, the same conversation with Boyd and Rabbi Brad, when we were talking about interfaith work, anything that we're talking about, whether it's mental health, whether it's politics, whether it's interfaith work, whatever, it's all the gritty stuff, right? If we make it so vanillified and we strip it down to really there's nothing left of grit, we're going to miss the beauty and the richness of whether it's an interfaith relationship or a conversation around politics or a conversation around our mental health, that there's power in really making space for the real conversations and not making it so one-dimensional that we lose the essence. But we sometimes as humans want to have that human experience. Like, we don't want to have the layers and the grit and the right, the cluster headaches and the relapses and the suicide death or the job loss or the infertility, whatever those things are. But I believe in a God that shows up in those spaces, and there will be a day that's exactly what we express gratitude over. Because that is where the sweet spot was. That is where the beauty came. That is where the wandering and the wondering for 40 years, the insights came, where the spiritual muscles grew, or the fortitude and resiliency that we didn't even know we had emerged, And I think how many times, for those in your audience that they've relapsed, how many times? I feel that in real sense of like, how can you get up off the mat one more time? Yeah. But what if this one more time is your gift and your offering,
For sure. Beautifully said. Wow. This is so good. So good, guys. Thank you for sharing so much beauty. Not to wind things down, but I think we probably have to. I hate to do
Part
that.
12.
I do.
Ganel-Lyn will break the internet, just so you know.
She will. I know.
The fact that she's on your podcast could break the internet.
Could break the internet.
Stop. Not true.
But I'd like to ask each one of you a question, or just to help someone who's listening to this podcast right now, who is maybe in that dark place, who has fallen down. They're not sure how to get back up. They don't feel the connection. They are maybe lacking compassion in their own life, and they struggle giving compassion away, and they're just in a bad spot. What would you tell that one person, Ganel-Lyn, right now, who's listening to this?
So I've said it probably on your show and your show multiple times, and I don't mind being a cliche and repeating it, that, our life isn't going to be better without you. And the reality is, I think, whether it's addiction or mental health or discouragement over the headlines on the news, where someone then is pushed to a point to take a gun and make a statement of some sort, there's this breaking point where we all wonder, am I making a difference at all? Am I effective at all in the spaces? Have I burned so many bridges? And I would just say, I know profoundly 10 years after Meg's passing, even 18 books published and speaking events and media and all of those opportunities, my life's not better without her, And so I would, in all sincerity that I can push into this mic, that there is a need for all of us, that God, in my mind, loves diversity, and our divinity is found in that. Yeah. And so what I love is there's so much more embracing of what we uniquely have to offer in the world than there was in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s when we were all growing up, right? Yeah. There was one way to do a wedding and life, and
we were drinking out of Dixie cups.
Exactly. we had to stretch the phone cord all the way down the hallway into a closet to have a private conversation, and we still had to listen for the click in case someone picked it up and listened to it, right? I mean, we had no Google. We had to go to the library and look at those encyclopedias for any answer. We couldn't listen to Boyd on a podcast or Todd on a podcast, right? There were so many things that was like, this is the way you do it. And I wonder if we've lost this sense of, well, now we have to be so unique and viral, and we have to be now we've swung so far to the other side that we're trying to break the mold for everything. What is it about a great neighbor that takes a garbage can in and says hi? Like, as Boyd said so powerfully, like, what we do matters on the micro level. And so
I love
to your question, you matter. We need whatever is unique about you. Even if you're saying there's nothing unique about me. I didn't create an Etsy store. I don't have a YouTube channel. I haven't solved cancer, or the border issues or whatever that is. We still need what your unique sourdough is in the world, whatever that is, and it may not be something on a macro level that you can measure or count, but we need you, and we're not better without you.
Beautifully said. Boyd, what would you say to that person?
First, I would say you're not alone, and so your job is first to reach out, and if you're in a good space today, your job is to reach out. If you know someone who's struggling, if you know someone who's in a dark space, if you're standing at the checkout line at the grocery store and you feel prompted to send somebody a text, you better do it. That's reaching out. I often challenge people to scroll different. Scroll different today. If you've got 5 minutes in between meetings, don't go to your social media feed. Don't doom scroll through the news. Go to your contacts and scroll through. And you will be inspired to send somebody a text, and you can say, I was thinking about you just now. And you matter. And thank them. I've texted people I haven't talked to in years and years, but they're still in my contacts. And I've been sitting there and think, I just thought of you today, and express gratitude and make that connection, because it is about those connections. And so whether if you're in the big black hole, scroll, pull it out, and someone will come to mind who might be able to help you today that you can reach out to.
That's been in that pit before.
That's amazing.
It's been in the bottom of the big black hole.
And
we've been there. We know the way out.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is, in that situation, when you are in a tough spot and you're feeling frustrated, it's also important to remember, and to remember things that you've done, people you love, things that you've seen, places that you've been.
I love that.
I often share the experience of, this was, again, old school. It was about 25 years ago. I was on the island of Penang in Malaysia. I was going to speak to a bunch of bankers at a leadership conference down there, and I was driving into the hotel. And as I'm driving in, there's this mountain off in the distance, and as everybody knows, there's nothing better than being on top of a mountain at sunrise. I do not do camping. Anything below a Marriott is technically camping in my space. So just to be very, very clear, very clear. Okay, good. We're all on the same page there.
Totally.
So, but I do love to be on top of a mountain at sunrise. Like I love that. And then if I can go back down and shower and sleep in a good bed, that's a good thing. So anyway, as I'm checking into the hotel, I asked the clerk. I said, is there a path up to the top of that mountain? She says, yeah, I think there's a way to get up there. I said, what time would I have to leave in the morning to be up there when the sun comes up on this little island? And she thought that was kind of funny, and she called over the bellman. They were all kind of joking about the crazy American
who wanted, look at this dude,
some crazy American wants to climb it in the dark. Undeterred, about 4:00 the next morning, I got up, went over there. There was a little path. I started making my way up the mountain. Halfway up, two monkeys decided to join me for the thing. So the three of us went up together. We got to the top, not sure where the monkeys went, but I'm up there on top of this mountain just as the sun comes up. And it was, 27 levels beyond breathtaking.
Yeah.
I could see the entire island, and then it was just a million shades of blue and green as far as I could see. It was magic. Dang. And I stayed up there for a while and just soaked it all in. And then finally it was time to go home. It's time to go back down the mountain, back to work, back to the hotel, back to the job. And a little reluctantly made my way back down. But so fascinating. That night, when I got to my room after the event, they'd done the turn down service. So if you have a mint on your pillow, you're not camping. So it's a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
But they had also put this poem on my pillow. And it's really interesting because we often ask, why climb? Why dig out of the hole?
Mm-hmm.
Why go back to rehab? Why? And that was the top of this little card that was on my pillow. It said, why climb?
Did everybody get that, or did you just?
I have no idea.
Oh, I'm going to
amazing.
tell myself it was
said-
only for you.
Yeah,
It said,
right.
why climb? And then here's the rest of it. It says, why climb? It says, what is above knows what is below. What is below does not know what is above. So one climbs and one sees. One may descend and see no longer, but one has seen. And there's an art to conducting yourself in the lower region of life by the memory of what you saw higher up.
Wow.
Dang.
And for so many of us who have fallen, struggled, failed, we may be down in the valley of the valley of the valley, down in the bottom, but we still have a memory of what it was like higher up. And that memory is what needs to drive us and lift us and inspire us to reach out, to start that climb again. No matter how hard the fall was, no matter how bumped and bruised and broken you may think you are, just let that memory of that view from higher up, when you were at your best, when you were making a difference, when you were in relationships that mattered, when you did have connection to people around you in ways that were significant. And that'll keep us going even on those no good, awful, terrible, really bad days.
Dang, this is like a therapy session. This feels so good. Beautifully said. Thank you. Wow. Just a beautiful feeling in the room. Thank you. Wow. If someone wants to reach out to you, Ganel-Lyn, and just get to know more about what you're doing, check out all your 18 books and
Listen,
all the stuff you're doing. What would be a good way for someone to, if they want to talk to you?
Start typing it in Google, and Google goes, "What name are you trying to find?"
Yeah.
And
Good luck typing the name.
Yeah,
Make
so-
sure you spell it right.
Yeah, 2 L's in the middle, Ganellyn, and you'll find me on all the places that maybe feel more comfortable. There's some platforms I don't hang out as much on, but I'm there, and I'm the only one with my name, so it's pretty easy to find me.
Find you.
Find my website, and there's a link to all of those places, and I love when the power of BeliefCast and other podcasts is that they live long, and you never know when someone puts earbuds in, and and a conversation helps, and it means a lot when people circle back and take that extra step to give feedback and say, hey, heard that conversation. It really helps. So would love to hear from your listeners.
Okay, love that. How about you, Boyd? What would be a good way for people to reach out
Kind of
to
same
you?
thing. There's not a lot of Boyds in the world
Right,
these days
that's
either.
true. Yeah,
So
you guys are
just
very
type it in.
unique.
You can find it pretty easy that way. And people can always just send me an email. Send me an email, Matheson, Matheson, Boyd, BOYDC @gmail.
Pretty
and
simple.
I don't care what time of day it is. I don't care if it's 2:30 in the morning.
Boyd's really good at responding fast, by the way.
He actually really is.
He is
Honestly,
really
like,
good at
as
it.
busy as this
it makes
guy
me
is, you would
nervous
think.
sometimes because
I
I'm
know.
like, wait, are you?
It's like, boom, that was fast. But I love that. Yeah, you really are. You're someone, and you mean what you say. When you're saying, hey, it doesn't matter what time of
I don't
day,
care.
you will respond. And I really do believe that because you've done that in my life. You know, so.
And same with you, Todd. I know you're usually up at 4 a.m. So if I have
I'm up early.
he's
Boyd
up
and I
early
usually-
journaling,
You know,
and
we're telepathically talking to each other.
I'm working on sourdough usually, and then I go back and do my meditations.
Yeah. No, well, hey, this has been fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for
Thanks
being
for
here
having
and
us.
sharing your knowledge and your love and compassion for not just the people listening, but for this world that we live in, this country that we live in. I love what has been said. I've learned so much personally today. Hopefully you guys have as well. And I encourage anyone, if you're struggling with anything, reach out to Boyd or Ganel-Lyn or myself, and we'd love to help you any way that we can. If this touches one person's life, I know that's cliche, but we really mean that. Like, if that helps you be a better neighbor and look at maybe this upcoming election year differently, like, you know what, because it's made me look at it differently just based on what I've learned today. I'm gonna do that and be more that way. And I love the scroll through your contacts and find some person that stands out that you haven't talked to in a while and shoot them a text or call them and tell them that you love them. I love that. So thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, there you go, folks. I told you this was going to be an amazing podcast. Thanks for tuning in. please share this with your friends and family, especially, if you have ones that are struggling and you're not sure how to maybe even break the ice with them. Sending them a link to this episode would be a great way to break the ice, and it allows you to follow up. Hey, what did you think about what was said in there? What can I do to show up for you, kind of thing. And so please do that. Again, thanks to my sponsors, and again, all the listeners, thank you. It means the world to me, and I love you. So guys, Boyd, Ganel-Lyn, love you guys. Thanks for being here.
Love you. Thanks.
Okay, till next time, everyone.